Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fourmation podcast. This is episode number 9, and we have finally gotten to the point where there is so much football for us to digest on this week's show. I am George, and today I'm joined by
Harry,
Sam,
Devon.
Yeah, there we go. If you're a regular listener or watcher, you probably know that by now. But if this is your first time, there you go. And we'll have our Twitter handles there as well. Please give us a follow. Also follow us on @_Fourmation whenever a podcast goes out, and you'll be able to find us on there. But we've got a lot to discuss today. We've had a load of games going on last week. Project Restart is underway. And then we'll have a little look ahead and a bit of news as well. Neil Warnock is back in football. More on that later.
Again.
But we're going to start by looking back at last week and discussing our thoughts. So last Friday night, that was Friday the 19th, was it? Norwich played Southampton, but the game we all want to talk about is Spurs against Man United. No, I'm kidding. We should mention Norwich Southampton. Harry,
George, take it away.
how pleased were you with how your team played on Friday?
The first 15 minutes was a bit concerning due to the fact that we just couldn't get out of our own half. You pressed us really, really high. We couldn't get out. I think we gave away a couple of poor set pieces, but as soon as the second half kicked off, we seemed to have more energy. And I think the big problem was that Norwich tried to play out the back quite a lot, and that suits our sort of pressing style. And we got a lot of chances, despite the fact we didn't score from any of them. A lot of our chances came from you trying to pass out the back, and that sort of gave us the edge in the game to start with. And then in the second half, we kicked on and were able to get three good goals.
Yeah, I think you've got it bang on there with the way that Southampton pressed. It was exactly the right way to play against Norwich. I also thought. Say again.
Say it without crying.
I also thought that that Saints looked a lot sharper. I don't know whether that was the case, but I thought towards the end, especially for that third goal, Redmond went through and all he had to do was just put it one way, and the defence was totally out of the way, which was embarrassing, to be honest. And Norwich struggled going forward too. They've now failed to score in 6 of their last 9 league games. I know 8 of those were obviously months ago, but it's still a worrying trend. I'm not going to answer this question myself because I don't really want to. But Devon, it's surely pretty much curtains for Norwich now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think pretty much. I think even when you were talking about it afterwards, when we were on about the PILA reports and stuff like that, is that even I could tell him that you might have been resigned to the drop. I think there were many aspects to that game of the potential that Norwich could have been. Great passing play. There's several players that are good enough to be in a strong Premier League side. It was just the frailties at the back. And going forward, I mean, everyone's been off the boil, and Pukki certainly looked very rusty. Chance in the second half. I don't know what happened. He just dragged it. It was going wide anyway. It took a deflect, went out for a call. I think the only player that looked sharp was Tim Krul. Made 2 very good saves, and again, that's been a trend all season, hasn't it? Where Tim Krul's really got you out of the gutter. But overall, I was quite impressed with how Southampton, after initially riding the storm of that first 10-15 minutes where Norwich were on and Dermage had that chance, that they looked good, they played some good football, and in the end, they were just running rings around Norwich. The 3 goals were quite fortunate. Some of them bobbled into Ings and, Armstrong and Redmond, even though it was good, technical ability on the ball. Norwich did back off too easily and allowed that space, and once you do that, you're looking for a beating anyway.
Yeah, it does look, as much as I don't enjoy saying it, it does look like Norwich are going to be resigned to the Championship again. But we should say, we'll obviously get onto this in a minute, the results at the weekend did kind of go their way. It's obviously out of their hands, but they play Everton. They will have played Everton by the time this goes out. So maybe by that point, but to be honest, the chances of them beating Everton based on Friday night look pretty slim. Southampton now 23 points away from home this season, which is the 4th best record in the league. Surely, Harry, now you can start looking up the table rather than down.
I'd hope so, to be fair. I think that away form is due to the fact that our home fans are slightly toxic if anything ever goes against them. So I'm not surprised we've got such a good record away from home. But yeah, I think for me, I still want one more point just to guarantee that. Just to guarantee that safety. I think 38 points is the absolute guarantee. But I think we're just a few points off of possible Europe. So for me, just end the season brightly and give confidence to the fans from the back end of next season to start. Sorry, back end of this season to start next season.
Well, you're playing Arsenal on Thursday. So
No, easy win.
That should be a win.
I hope so.
Arsenal are away from the
relegation. Arsenal fan TV.
Yeah, it's gold.
Later on the Friday night was Spurs against Man United. Big discussion we had on last week's podcast was about Paul Pogba's return. And Sam, were you impressed with his influence off the bench?
Very much so. Very much so. He was brilliant for them. I think when Ole introduced him and Mason Greenwood in the second half, it really turned the game around. Obviously, that you played that amazing pass to Marcus Rashford on the half volley, just so good. And then obviously you won the penalty for Bruno Fernandes to convert. So, like I said, I think a lot of Manchester United fans are talking about how him and Bruno would link up, and from what we see, and I know it was only half an hour, but from what we've seen already, they look like a really good duo.
Yeah, I can't believe Sam last week definitely said that they wouldn't work together, and it definitely wasn't. Despite my comments, I do agree that Pogba and Fernandes complemented themselves at each other much more expressively. As Pogba got on the ball more, he had a play that we'd seen, when he was over there. So that was a terrible sentence, but we did get flashes of his old brilliance, and maybe this layoff has done him good to get fully fit, and now Man United can build that midfield around them too. Maybe get a better defensive, stalwart there, and build a good team, because their front three is electric. The midfield is well balanced if they get that defensive midfielder in. And it's just the defence that they need to sort out. And also one player in particular, David De Gea's future. There was a lot of questions being asked. Roy Keane had some words to say about him. What was your thoughts on his performance?
You mentioned the Roy Keane comments. I think he was right to criticise, but he maybe got a little bit too passionate about it. There's no need it was only 1-0, wasn't it?
Yeah, he only said he'd fight him. I mean,
I think Dean Henderson.
That's quite it. Yeah, Roy Keane's book.
After the season Dean Henderson has had, I think really he will be eyeing that spot up next year, potentially, depending on how Sheffield United do. But I don't think Solskjaer is likely to want to hand him out to Sheffield United again.
Yeah, it's tough that the treatment that Day has had recently, considering how good he's been for United in some of their worst periods. I mean, he was it like back-to-back Player of the Years that he won just a couple of years ago. So it's really tough on him. I think that he's getting all this criticism over a couple of mistakes, but like you say, with Dean Henderson joint top in the clean sheet Golden Glove race, then he's definitely knocking on the door of the Manchester United #1 spot.
Yeah, we should mention Spurs as well. Since the draw against Man United, they have beaten West Ham at home. So that's 4 points from their first two. Harry, do you think they've got maybe an outside chance of still qualifying for the Champions League or not?
I think so. I think the break has really helped them with Steve Bergwijn coming back, Heung-min Son's come back, Harry Kane's come back, and I've been impressed. You know, Mourinho's been known as quite a defensive coach, but before when Tottenham scored, before that point, they were quite attacking against West Ham. I know it's only against West Ham because they sat back and with 2 banks of 4, but they attacked then as well. I think when they need to, they are a very, very good attacking side. They've got an outside chance. Do I think so? I think they've given themselves a bit too much to do. I think a couple of poor results before the break didn't help them at all. But I think they've definitely got a chance because I think they're playing good football. They've got a solid squad as well. So I think they've got an outside chance. Will they? I'm not too sure.
I'd like to counter that because I think West Ham for large periods of that game looked a lot better on the ball. They just couldn't find that end product. I don't know if that was just looking on blue tinted because Mikel Antonio were up front, but I think West Ham had more of an encouraging performance. They just lacked that kind of clinicalness, and you know, is it Soucek? His own goal kind of epitomised West Ham's bad luck recently. On the plus side, especially for like England fans and fans of the Premier League, Harry Kane looked a lot sharper than he has. Obviously coming back after a long period out. But his goal hopefully might kickstart his season again.
It's weird how the league shaped up this year because I think before the West Ham game they were level on points with Crystal Palace, and they were still talking about just avoiding relegation. So if you're putting Spurs in that race, you got to throw Palace in there as well, maybe.
In episode 8, we spoke a fair bit about Arsenal's woes in their defeat against Man City, but you'd have to say they continued on to the weekend. They played Brighton and lost it in the last minute, 2-1. Leno was injured. We do think that the injury is not maybe as bad as first feared, but Devon, how did Arsenal pick themselves up from such a terrible start to the restart?
I don't even think a resuscitator is restart Arsenal's season at the minute. They look short of confidence. They look so poor. And again, like I said last week, it just looks like a team of passengers at the minute. There's no one really taking responsibility in that side. The only responsibility shown is when David Luiz came out and apologised against Man City. Brighton, as we argued last week or the week before in the preview, they played some good football again. But they're, some negatives came out about Brighton, mainly about their kind of vigorous play. Maupay in particular, who also questioned Arsenal's humility. That was quite a shock. We hadn't seen that kind of bite in the Premier League since Luis Suarez, which I kind of like. It's kind of like old football. No,
Nice.
not literally. I mean, but see, I just know puns off my head there like that. But yeah, I think Arsenal again are poor and they're really in a rut, and they just they'll be hoping the season gets done very quickly because, at the minute they're looking down, not up.
Yeah, and you mentioned Brighton as well. Since the Arsenal game again, they drew 0-0 with Leicester. It could have been a win, but 4 points from their first 2 has really pulled them away from the pack at the bottom. So Graham Potter must be delighted with that, Sam.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that win against Arsenal was their first in the calendar year, so they really needed a good start. They've definitely got the hardest run out of everyone down there, so they need every point they can get in this run. So yeah, it's been a really positive start for them. Obviously, they could have won that game against Leicester if Neil Maupay had converted that penalty. It was a terrible penalty. But yeah, good start for Brighton.
And that game was one of 4 on Saturday. In the other games, Watford battled back against Leicester to earn a draw. That was quite some finish at Vicarage Road. West Ham were beaten at home by Wolves after their first 2. They've still got 0 points. But I think we should maybe talk about Bournemouth on Saturday evening, who are in that bottom 3. They played against Crystal Palace, which on paper is a game that they thought they had to win. and Harry, they looked really uninspiring, didn't they?
Yeah, you'd hope if you're a Bournemouth fan to come back from the break, inspired. But I think I was listening to a Bournemouth podcast a few days ago, yesterday it was, and I think Eddie Howe was sort of feeling that this, because they've had 3 months off and there's so much build up towards this game, they sort of just bottled the game. It's a game that they could be winning. And to be honest, I tipped them to stay up before the end of the season because they have got the quality in the squad, but they didn't inspire, to be honest with you. And now with Ryan Fraser not going to play another game, he hasn't been that great this season, but he's still their most creative player, I believe, in terms of chances created. It really doesn't look good because they didn't create any sort of meaningful chance. I know Crystal Palace are good. I'm pretty sure that's their 4th win in a row where they've not conceded as well. So Palace are on a good run of form despite the massive break, obviously. But it's a game they would have seen as winnable, and they didn't get a touch.
Yeah, I think I watched not much of the game, but the periods that I watched, there were only really David Brooks, who would have been a welcomed returnee from injury, and even like them, they look towards the more attacking players rather than Brooks up front, and they just never seem to get a look in. I think Palace hit them early, and then once them 2 goals go in, the confidence was shot. And maybe if Palace on, then Bournemouth would have been more confident to go forward and maybe get back into it. But as soon as that second one went in, I think they would have just shot all confidence.
Yeah, and go on, Sam.
I was just going to say, I think Palace are really flown under the radar this season. Like Harry mentioned already, they've been really solid, and they've had a couple of great individual performers. The goal scorers, Milivojevic and Jordan Ayew, they've been brilliant this season, where Zaha has been not so great, but the team around him's picked him up. So I think they're really in contention, like I already mentioned, for a European spot.
Sam, do you think... Oh, sorry, Josh.
Go on.
I was just saying, I think if Zaha could actually pick himself up and stop dwelling on the past news that when he was linked to Arsenal and that, do you think if he got into some kind of form, Crystal Palace next season with that front 3 and the creative player behind it, they could do something next year?
I mean, we've seen in previous seasons how good Zaha can be, so yeah, why not? I think they could be. Roy Hodgson's made them a really solid team, like I already mentioned. So if Zaha comes back to its best form, they've got that X factor up top again, and they could be a really consistent, European finishing team.
And if we move on to Sunday now, and I'm going to hand over to our resident Sheffield Wednesday fans to talk us through how the Blades got on. Devon?
I didn't catch the last end of that, sorry, but I assume
I just said I'd hand it over to you to tell us what happened at St James's Park.
For the first half, it was kind of a non-starter. I don't think either team got a real grasp of the game. And I think, if anyone, I'd have to argue Sheffield United were probably keeping the ball better, but Newcastle got forward, especially in that first 10 minutes when Joelinton got forward, and I think it was, in the end, it was a good clearance or a pass back to the goalkeeper instead of a shot. I think that just epitomised his last 28 games in between scoring from Spurs and scoring today. So scoring on Sunday. Sheffield United were kind of their fault that they lost that game. Egan, again, he's had a difficult start to restart with Keenan Davis running in ragged against Aston Villa on Wednesday last week. And also he got sent off for the 2 dragbacks on Joelinton, who did cause a lot of problems up front with his strength. And then the opening goal as well is something that we've not seen from Sheffield United all season. Stevens completely missing kicking the ball, and St Maximin, who had a fantastic game, put it in at the near post, which arguably Dean Henderson could have saved, but again, it's one of them where the sharpness is completely out the window. And then from there, Newcastle just took the game by the scruff of the neck. Richie scored a fantastic goal, and then Joelinton got his maiden Premier League home goal. is second in 30 games, which I'm sure it will be a massive release for him and Steve Bruce.
Yeah, I think the Geordie Nation, as a Football Manager YouTuber refers to them as, I think the Geordie Nation will have been dancing in the streets. That Joe Linton goal, like you say, hasn't scored since August last year. So he will be pretty chuffed with that, as will Steve Bruce. And you mentioned there, Devon, a tough start to the year for the Blades. Do you think they've maybe changed something in the way they play which has gone wrong, or do you think just a bit of misfortune like we saw last week with the goal line technology failing?
There's definitely been a change to the way they play. I think they hold the ball more than they used to. They used to get, direct and get forward, which I thought, because against Aston Villa when they did hold the ball, I thought that might be due to, Sanderberg playing instead of John Fleck, and we know how direct Fleck likes to be. But even when Fleck were reintroduced, they still was holding onto the ball too long. I think they kind of shifted into a new style of play. Whether that's just because of the opponents being Aston Villa and Newcastle, that they want to hold the ball, they want to restrict Newcastle and Aston Villa from playing, which at large parts they just didn't have the capabilities of doing that. Whether we'll see tonight, obviously a disclaimer that we're recording this on Wednesday, so we won't see tonight's results, but they play Manchester United, so whether they go back to that, keeping it compact and then going forward with the overlapping centre halves and really hit Man United like they did at Bramall Lane in that 3-3 draw. I just think that because they've changed the style, it's kind of knocked the confidence and momentum, and whether that was intentional or just because of the restart and no crowd, especially with, with how vigorous that style of play is. If you've got the home support or the away fans backing you, it just pushes you that extra little bit. So whether they either home advantage, even though they've been away twice, or the backing from the showroom boys has really limited to their play. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and later on Sunday it was Villa against Chelsea. Chelsea came from behind to win this one. It was a pretty good turnaround. Pulisic and Giroud getting the goals. So Chelsea have now got a bit of breathing space in that top four. But I think we should probably talk about Villa, who, although they went in front, they were barely a threat going forward. Grealish was very quiet. Keenan Davis, who had caused so many problems against Sheffield United, was pretty isolated up front. Harry, how worrying is this performance for Aston Villa's hopes, even though they were against a strong side in Chelsea?
Yeah, I think they haven't shown a lot of attacking intent, and I don't blame them if they conceded quite a lot this season. Then they're against Chelsea, and I thought they were going to do a really good smash and grab job because they went 1-0 up despite only having 30% of the ball and went in about almost the hour mark without conceding, and then two not defensive lapses but two goals back to back inside about 2 minutes just destroyed their confidence completely. And I would be concerned because apart from Jack Grealish, they don't really have many positive sparks. Keenan Davis was good against Sheffield United, but he's an isolated figure when they're playing against top 6, top 8 teams because they don't fancy themselves on the attack, because if they get countered attack on their defence, it's probably one of the weakest in the Premier League, despite the fact they've got England international Tyrone Mings there. So for me, I'd be quite concerned, despite the fact they did have a positive game against Sheffield United.
Anything to add on Villa? Do we think they're doomed, or have they still got a chance?
I mean, going in front doesn't seem to mean much to them at the moment because they've now lost 5 Premier League games after scoring first this season. So, I mean, we've talked about them already, that they've spent a lot of money at the start of the season, but they've spent it on really nothing. And we're seeing that now playing, Keenan Davis up top, who's a youth product, instead of the signings they made. So I think it doesn't look good for them.
I think we've seen 2 different Dean Smith teams here. Against Sheffield United, they really attacked him and got into Sheffield United's throw, and that style looked better for Villa if they were going to do anything. And I think that approach would have worked against Chelsea, who, again, that were their first game. Villa have already got 90 minutes under their belts. If they could go into Chelsea, hit them while they're vulnerable, then maybe that first goal could have turned into 2. Instead, they were more conservative and really, especially second half. That first, when Christian Pulisic came on, Villa just sat back and let the fullbacks come forward, and it were obviously Azpilicueta who put the ball in for Pulisic. And as soon as they let Chelsea have a little bit of a sniff, as we saw, Chelsea just got back into it, and much like Frank Lampard's team, they are quite hungry. They go for goals, and that's what we saw on Saturday. It's Sunday.
Just to touch on Chelsea a bit more, like you mentioned Pulisic there, and Frank Lampard said after the game his performances are going to be crucial in the run-in. He's playing his first game since New Year's Day, and technically Pulisic might be playing for his spot in the side next season with Timo Werner and Hakim Ziyech coming in. It might be tough for him to get in there. Obviously Olivier Giroud as well, he scored. So for Chelsea's attacking players, these last few games are crucial to make an impression to Frank Lampard that they're good enough to stay.
I was impressed with Pulisic when he were at Dortmund, and I was always good in for a move when Chelsea did go in for him. And I think Lampard should trust him, because even in his limited performances, once he's settled into England and how the Premier League style of play is, he's kind of adapted himself rather than being a player that holds onto the ball too long at Dortmund. It's become more of a fast style of play, and I think that going forward, I'd rather someone like Pulisic come in rather than Willian, and maybe Werner on the left, and obviously Pulisic taking that right hand side. But again, Ziyech, it just depends how Lampard sees fit. I'd personally start Pulisic because I think he's a very good player, and he's only like 24, still got plenty of years. Ziyech is in the prime. I think it'd be two good players to learn off, and even then, that front three will all intertwined anyway and move positions. So if he can get that free flowing balance right, Chelsea could be a really, really good threat next year.
And of course, the flagship game for the Premier League's return was at Goodison Park on Sunday evening. It was on free-to-air television. Millions tuned in across the country. Of course, it ended 0-0. 7 of the last 8 Premier League Merseyside derbies at Goodison Park have ended in a draw, which is an incredible stat, I think. But it just sums it up. Harry, how disappointed were you with the spectacle that they put on?
Yeah, disappointed. But if I was forced to put a bet on for the scoreline, I'd probably say 0-0, because I might be wrong at this, but I think the last 3 at Goodison Park have all been 0-0.
You're
so
correct.
It's been a bit of a drab fixture. But I think Everton were quite unlucky not to get the win, in all fairness. Right at the back end of the game, they had Calvert-Lewin's flick, good save by Alisson, and then it was Tom Davies at the back post who hit the post, who got unlucky there. But I think for Liverpool, they did massively seem like they were missing out on Robertson, because their attack down the left wasn't as promising. Milner can't get up and down the wings as much. Joe Gomez was bright when he came on, but he's not as natural as Robertson. Look at the right wing, Minamino didn't really do much. You can't really expect anything from him, because he's still a young player that's only played a very small amount of minutes, but he was holding a similar position to Firmino, and they're sort of holding that same position rather than him staying on the right or someone staying on the right. There was no real outlet, and it was only really Mane that was really getting the ball on that side, and he was silenced by Coleman. So I think 0-0 was probably the fair result, if not maybe a sneaky 1-0 Everton.
Everton were cautious again, and for good reason, because this derby's it has been the most one-sided derby in the last decade. I mean, Liverpool are now unbeaten in 22 games against Everton. That's the joint longest run they've had in their history against one club. So I think this derby is slightly overrated, to be honest, as a spectacle in terms of the actual competition. I know the proximity, they're really close to each other, and the atmosphere and everything, but it was a really poor game in general, to be honest.
George, do you think that if Everton were to get the win, they could have been the very, very outside shout of a European spot?
Yeah, I think it could have boosted their hopes. I did a preview for their game against Norwich, which, as we said, will have already taken place by the time this goes up. But I said in there that they still have an outside shot now. You never know. With the inconsistencies that teams have showed this season. Other than Liverpool, every team has had a blip. If Everton can go on a run, then there is always a chance that they can capitalise. And with Ancelotti, they don't look like losing many games. So I definitely think they're in with a shot for sure.
You got to trust in Don Carlo.
And Don Calvert-Lewin.
So, yeah, Liverpool were forced to wait a little bit longer for their title. So they will play Crystal Palace, who, as we said, looked impressive against Bournemouth. That will have already happened by the time this goes up. But Man City, who are Liverpool's closest rivals, they probably know the title's going to Anfield. Guardiola has already admitted it. But Phil Foden for them in the Monday night game played a starring role as they wiped Burnley aside. Devon, how impressive was he?
It was fantastic. All the way through that game, I think I was covering it for PILA on Twitter anyway, but you could just see the aspects of David Silva and how he moves and how Phil Foden has learnt off him. And I think that next season will be Phil Foden's season to shine. And I'd say it could be an early shout for one of the players of this season, a very early shout. But in terms of how consistent Man City are, Phil Foden on Monday night was instrumental to how they played. He linked up the play very well. 2 goals, obviously. Were heavily involved in Silva's goal as well. And I think he's just going to become one of the figures, like a Manchester City legend, if not already, because it is just brilliant to watch. Another point that I wanted to bring up was that if Liverpool hadn't have run away with it beforehand, and it was much tighter at the top, I think we'd have seen a crumble from Liverpool at the minute, because we talked about starting well, and in Manchester City's both their opening 2 games, obviously they had that game in hand against Arsenal. Man City have just got straight onto it, whereas Liverpool really did not. They looked like they were back under Roy Hodgson. That they just looked poor. They kept missing passes. Whereas Man City look like they've clearly kept themselves fit over this period. They've been sharp, and if it were down to the wire, you'd be backing City all the way to catch up to Liverpool and claim the title off them. But obviously that won't happen, because in the next 3, probably 2 episodes of the Fourmation, we'll be talking about how Liverpool have lifted the title in front of no fans, and we'll be able to just get that part of the season curtailed, because then we can focus on the European spots and the relegation fight.
Yeah, just to touch on Phil Foden a bit more. I mean, for a young attacking player, there's very few other places you'd want to learn than Manchester City, with the 2 Silvers, with Aguero, with Jesus, Mahrez, all those players. It's one of the best places to grow as a player. And with David Silva leaving at the end of the season, then that starting spot can be his. With all the games that Man City still have to play this season, with the FA Cup and the Champions League still to play for, then he can really stake his claim.
On the flip side to that, then, it's probably also one of the hardest teams to get in if you're learning from it anyway, because we've seen, Mahrez were fantastic, and then they've got Leroy Sané on the bench. No matter how many times he's going to get linked away, he's still one of City's probably better wingers at the club, I'd say. But again, he's not getting a look in, and especially for more young talent, there's only really been Eric Garcia that's come through in the last season or 2, apart from Phil Foden. And whether, again, there's always that question of do more players follow in the footsteps of Sancho and leave, or do they stay and City look to build on that young talent? Because City, no matter how much City go through their academy, they're always going to look to bring in that £60 million player. And when they've got the capabilities of doing that, I think young players probably don't flourish as much as they should do.
Yep, that's pretty much all the Premier League games that have taken place up to this point covered. As we said, with the Project Restart, they are cramming as many games in as they can. So over the week until episode 10, there could have been so many changes to that Premier League table. Fingers crossed, Norwich produce a miracle and beat Everton.
Come on, Norwich.
We should move on to the Championship, which also resumed last week. And Leeds, who are so close to returning to the Premier League. They've still got work to do, obviously, but they didn't get off to a very good start, Devon. They didn't play badly, but they went down 2-0 to Cardiff. What did you make of this game?
Even though, like I said, I covered it, the title was All Leeds Falling Apart Again. However, I if I would be Elsa, I'd be encouraged by the style of play they played again. I feel like I've said this too many times this podcast, but they played some good ball. They held the ball well. They did get into it. Were just as many games in the Championship have been this weekend. It's that final ball. It's that finishing touch, and it seems like all clubs have lost a bit of the clinicalness when up front. And again, it was just two bad mistakes that Cardiff punished first time. I mean, the first one, Calvin Phillips tried to switch the ball, gave it straight to Junior Hoylett, and even though Phillips was the initial mistake, the mistake was more in that Ben White and Liam Cooper didn't come and close him down quick enough. They just kind of stood off him and let him, have a shot at Meslier in the goal.
They were social distancing, weren't they?
Massively. I think that was more than 2 meters. Surely they should have preempted that Boris was going to, relax the meter rule, and then maybe they could get a toe on it. But still, there is slight questions that keeper could have got a hand to it as well. It was a strange dive and didn't really get off the ground either. But by the by, it gives Leeds a chance. And even though Bamford defended brilliantly from Jack Harrison, in the second half, Liam Cooper gave the ball straight to Mendes Lang, who then found Robert Glatzel. And we've got to give his hats off to the finish because it were very good from and that's not really been very consistent for Cardiff this season.
I love those ones that crack off the post, especially with no crowd. You can hear it even more. But yeah, go on.
But I'm gonna say, to be fair, even though it hits the post and then back at the net, you'll never miss that, the crowd going, and then going mental once it's hit the post and back at net. That's something you can't replace. But hearing the ball hit the net cleanly is one of the best sounds ever. So the point.
I was just going to touch on those mistakes again. Especially the first one, I don't understand what Phillips is doing. Like, there's really not much pressure on him. You could just play the simple pass, but he doesn't take a touch, plays an off-balance pass, and it goes haywire. And it was just the story of individual mistakes for Leeds. I mean, Bamford standing on the line, blocking Jack Harrison's shot. That was another one. So just sloppiness in the key areas from Leeds, who, like you said, played a decent game, but didn't come out with the win. And I mean, it's typical of them with the results the day before going their way. West Brom dropping points, Fulham losing, that they don't capitalise on it.
I was going to say the Phillips mistake. Just before that, Phillips did have a grasp on the game. He was pinging balls from either wing, switching the play. And I think once you've got back into that stride, it's easy just to go back to the mindset that you've been playing. We're in the final game week, so you've had 30 games already that, you're sharp through that. And I think he just forgot that we'd had a 3-month break and we'd only had a few seasons, because normally 9 times out of 10, if that was without the break of the coronavirus and that was the game after Leeds' last, I think that had just been executed perfectly to the right back. Whereas now it's been a bit of a, your brain's a bit, it's going to be more fatigued and it's just forgot basically.
Yeah, and Sam, you mentioned the results near the top, probably going Leeds' way. West Brom drew, and then Brentford won at Fulham. So it's not over yet, but Leeds and West Brom have still got a chance to maybe get back to it this weekend. And there's 2 big games coming up, which we'll touch on in a moment. But I did want to mention as well, Derby County won at the weekend. And back in February, we were at Pride Park for a UEFA Youth League game, and in the Derby team on that day was 18-year-old Louis Sibley. He's now started 2 games for Derby, 1 before the break and now 1 at the weekend, and he scored 4 goals, a hat-trick against Millwall. Harry, how far can Sibley go?
That's the thing. I think Derby have got a very good but outside chance of getting playoffs this season. If they don't get promoted this season or next, he's gonna be off, because at his age, he's been very very impressive. He looks natural in his role in the Derby side. So yeah, Premier League easily top 6, maybe in 5 years' time. You never know.
Typical. As soon as a young English player does something good, all over him. I think, yeah, he's been great in those two games for the senior team we've seen him, but it's still too early for me to.
He just needs minutes. He needs minutes in the next. Don't go. I wouldn't say go now, because if he goes to a Premier League side, he'll probably be on the bench or in the under 23. So for me, the next 2 seasons, he's got to get those 35 plus appearances. Just get that first team football, get the goals, get the assists, and actually prove that you're a consistent player rather than a flash in the pan.
No doubt he'll have a nice juicy contract waiting for him at the end of the season from Derby.
I suppose as well, the encouraging signs are that, you know, where he picked off that goal against Blackburn was a phenomenal effort before the break, and as I said, the promise that he shows to pick up where he left off after that layoff was fantastic. It didn't look like there'd been a break in terms of how Sibley played. All 3 goals were clinical finishes, and you'd expect that from like more of a opponent striker rather than a centre attacking midfielder that's 18 and only just broke onto the scene. And I think the track record of, you know, Jayden Bogle, Max Bird, and Jason Knight, all 3 of them coming through in recent seasons and becoming key parts is going to be, you know, it's going to be a massive confidence boost for Louis Sibley, and probably players like Morgan Whittaker and I think his name's Erin Cashin in the under 18s that we saw, and especially they've had a fantastic running in the is it the under 18s Champions League or what?
Yeah, the UEFA.
Yeah.
So
that one.
That one. They've had a fantastic run, and unfortunately got knocked out, and Brad covered it, didn't he, in Austria, but they've had a great run. It's all confidence at the minute. And next season, even if Derby don't get playoffs, which I don't think they will this year, next season, if Koku can keep the attitude and the momentum there, then we could be seeing a very dangerous Derby County side next season.
But Harry did mention there about Derby's playoff hopes, and you would have to say that they have a very good chance. The playoff picture in the Championship is wide open. The Rams are 12th in the league, but incredibly, they're only 3 points off 6th spot. There are so many teams in that mix. I wouldn't want to predict it, and I don't think we should, to be honest, because I think
we'll end up embarrassing ourselves.
Yeah, there is
everyone's just waiting for Sheffield Wednesday now to, get that 8-point gap closed and come back into the picture. I'm just disappointed that we didn't get to Forest on Saturday.
Everyone, aka Devon.
So there is so much still to be played. So we're not going to do predictions today. We will now have a look quickly at the relegation battle down there. There was a big game on Saturday, which we did mention last week. Hull against Charlton. Charlton having to go without their top scorer, Lyle Taylor. But they seemed to cope pretty well and got a 1-0 win, Devon.
Yeah, it's a tale of 2 contrasting sides. And as we mentioned last week, the derby of the players not signing contracts. And out of both of them, like I said last week, I'd back Charlton rather than Hull, and this is why. Hull conceded courtesy of George Long's. I don't want to pin it on George Long, but he did come to try and catch it and just fluffed at it, allowing Jason Pearce to score. His name just like completely blanked from my mind there, but Charlton, I think Hull's in a very bad position at the minute. We've got the Allen owners. That's just one podcast episode in itself at the minute, but the kind of censorship of the Athletic and, well, the censorship of Hull Live, and then the criticism of the Athletic, and it seems like it's a very toxic place to play at the minute. And out of everyone, like we said last week, I can see Hull going down. And it doesn't buy them well as well that Luton picked up a very, very good point against Preston and Barnsley beat QPR. So especially for one relegation candidate that we will talk about in a minute with a new manager, I presume. I can't see. I can't see Hull getting out of it at the minute unless a miracle happens. Grant McCann needs something up his sleeve to get them out of the rut that they are in.
Yeah, and we will move on now to Middlesbrough. You mentioned there with Hull, like you said, the local press being banned is never going to be a good thing, I don't think. And there's been a lot of national journalists. I think I saw Henry Winter yesterday jumping to the defence of one of the Hull writers, saying they write with, balance and they're fair. So to do that is pretty bad thing.
Surely the local favourite of anyone is going to be, the nicest, really.
You would think so.
That's their team.
As well as journalists, who wants to read news that have been filtered for PR? We want it. We want integrity. We want the news story. You want the truth. You don't want to be, like if with Wednesday at the minute, and if we were in the position Hull were, I wouldn't be expecting the Sheffield Star saying, "Oh, look how good Sheffield Wednesday might be at the minute. Look at them 10 passes that we did in that goal." You want to know what's happening. I don't want the Sheffield Star or Yorkshire Live not discussing the current court case that's going on at Wednesday with the points deduction. I want to know what's happening. And the censorship of that is kind of, it's a very bold statement, but it's like Germany in 1940 when, the very censorship of newspapers. And that's certainly what
that's some comparison.
So Middlesbrough, another team down at the bottom, lost 3-0 to Swansea at the weekend. Before we mention the big news about the managerial change, we won't say his name yet. If you haven't seen it, we won't say his name. Swansea, Devon, I know you wanted to talk about Ryan Brewster, the Liverpool loanee, who impressed on Saturday.
I didn't know you was reading my notes there, George. Are you in? But Ryan Brewster looks sharp again. He just looks like a talented youngster. That he just needs it. It's all about the correct choices at the minute. Does he? If he goes on one too many loan spells, will he end up like Ben Woodburn, a bit of a flash in the pan kind of player, or will he become a key player at Liverpool? Probably not in the starting 11, but from the bench. His chances might have been boosted with Werner going to Chelsea. Will Klopp get him in next season and let him play? Or I'd probably be in favour of Brewster going to someone like Southampton or any other mid-table Premier League sides. Maybe Palace and helping that front three if Zaha doesn't kick off. I think the future is bright for Brewster, who did win that World Cup in the Under-17s Championships.
Yeah, and Middlesbrough, this defeat leaves them just above the drop zone, but only on goal difference above Hull. So they've decided to get rid of Jonathan Woodgate, who was a player for them and a very good player for them in the past. And they have replaced him with none other than Neil Warnock. Harry, what were your immediate thoughts when you heard this news?
Not shock, because I think Woodgate, no offence to the lads, but I think he overstays there, I must say. They've got a good base squad, but I think now they're probably going to stay up as long as they work hard. Neil Warnock is a professional at keeping clubs up, and I think they're just outside the relegation zone. Who have they got next? They've got Stoke and Hull and QPR. So winnable fixtures there. Winnable fixtures with teams around them, especially the latter two. So yeah, I can see them staying up now, especially with the strike partnership of Fletcher and Assombalonga. I think they both started on the bench last game, so they tried to say a bit of a message. But yeah, those two up front, dangerous too if you've got them both firing.
Devon, Middlesbrough got rid of Tony Pulis, who is known for his very defensive style and very physical style. And they got in Jonathan Woodgate to kind of, I'm guessing they got him in to try and make their football more attractive. But now Steve Gibson has retracted and he's gone and got Warnock in. I'm trying to think of a question now, but do you think Warnock is the man to kind of give these group of players the reality check that they need and remind them of the situation that they are in?
It will take someone like Neil Warnock to say how it is, as most Sheffielders do. I think it's probably the best appointment out there at the minute, because there's absolutely no good managers out there. Who are they going to get in? And I'm going to say, Pardew. Is he going to come in and ruin the club? With Neil Warnock, it's kind of like a safety net, where as if because he probably will keep them up, and then next season he'll probably look to do what he did similarly with Cardiff and make him a force next season. But I think Borough have been one of them teams that have come down from the Premier League and have been a bit like Wigan. Even though Wigan didn't bounce back up, but when Borough have come down, they've really struggled to adapt back into life in the Championship. Like Norwich, when Norwich do come down, they're quite ready made and have always been a solid kind of team in the Championship. Whereas Borough, they look completely out of it at the minute. And I thought the timing was strange. We've just had a 3-month layoff. We saw with Nathan Jones coming back into Luton that they got the change done early. It was strange how they waited until the first game to then get rid of Woodgate and get Neil Warnock in, because it does seem like it's been a change in the making sort of thing. And I think it just feels weird that we're in 2020. Lots of weird things have been happening, and not the weirdest thing that's happened this year is Neil Warnock going back. So it is a crazy time at the minute.
Yeah, the most important thing is, will he say this is his last job again for like the 5th time in a row?
As long as if Chris Wilder does eventually leave Sheffield United, Warnock doesn't go back and then make him another force again. That'll end up happening. I'm
not sure he can resist all these jobs, to be honest, Sam. I think he just...
Oh, he's had about 36 of them.
It is strange how Neil Warnock is one of the last managers of that kind of say how it is football managers that has managed to last this long and still be effective. We've seen like Tony Pulis was in that and he's not managed to kick off this season. Harry Redknapp was one of their managers and he's completely fallen off. Now he's a reality TV star pretty much. So to be fair, if Neil Warnock came out with a show like, I'd definitely watch it. That'd be hilarious. I think.
Put him in the jungle.
Bit harsh on Harry.
Can you imagine? I think Harry Redknapp.
Last English manager to win a top trophy.
Yeah, but let's be right. He's not pulling up any trees anytime soon, and that spell at Birmingham was a nightmare.
So I thought Neil Warnock being appointed the big news of the week. It's only right that we do the quiz on the man himself. So get your notepads ready. Devon's self-promoting again.
So he's got
Not
it ready.
That I mind, Devon.
Not self-promoting, promoting the channel.
Yeah, this is 16th round of the quiz because we obviously carried it over from doing our radio show, and it is all about Neil Warnock. So 5 questions. Let's do this.
Come on,
okay. Question number 1 is, I think if you've seen this, then you will definitely know it. How many times has Warnock won promotion as a manager?
Oh God.
What's the Premier League or just in general? Are we talking a general promotion?
All the promotions he's had, not just Premier League ones. And I should say that he holds the record for the most in English football, so that might help you.
It's guest season, baby.
No.
He's had so many clubs.
I'm stuck on 2 numbers.
Probably had one like Gainsborough or something. Right.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Devon, get your answer down. Question number 2. In August 2014, Warnock returned to Crystal Palace for his second spell as manager there. but who did he replace?
Crystal Palace. What year was it? 2014.
2014.
Oh, no.
Harry's pretending that he doesn't know.
No, for me,
no.
for me, it's one of two. And normally, when I say that, it's
Oh,
the third option.
you
I
always
absolutely
do
no
this,
idea
Harry.
about.
Okay, question number 3. Now, this one might be easier for one person than the rest of you, but Warnock has managed 5 different Yorkshire clubs during his managerial career. How many can you name? There are 5 points available.
Oh my
He's
days!
managed 5 different Yorkshire clubs.
Okay.
How many can you name?
You say that. I can only name 3.
There are definitely
I only got
5.
2.
I went through last night, and there are definitely.
See, I'm not very good at geography. That's my
Oh.
issue. So
I've only got 2.
I've got 1 at the moment, but that's the obvious one because I've genuinely got.
Are these league clubs or is there some non-league in there?
One of them, I believe, isn't. Well, no, I know that they're not a league club, not a football league club anymore. But I think they were.
Even in Yorkshire.
Yeah. This
He's
last.
going to be making some ground on me here because I've only got 1.
Okay, number 4, Harry. You can add to it if some come to you. Who did Warnock's Cardiff draw 0-0 with on the final day of the 2017-18 season to seal promotion to the Premier League? It was on the final day. They invaded the pitch afterwards.
0-0 draw.
Can you remember watching it? If so, who were they playing?
When you speak of 0-0s, all I can think about is that I think it was 0-0 when Wolves and Cardiff met, and we had that iconic moment of Neil Warnock telling Nuno to back off.
I think Wolves won 1-0 that night. I've got a feeling. I think Neves scored a free kick.
He did.
And then Ruddy saved a penalty, if I remember rightly.
I remember Gary Medine missing.
So yeah, take a punt at that.
No.
And then question number 5. He mentions this woman in a lot of interviews. What is Neil Warnock's wife's first name?
Oh no!
Honestly, he has mentioned his wife in so many interviews down the years. Maybe it's difficult to remember, but I thought I'd have that one in there for a bit of fun. Admittedly, maybe it's not general knowledge, but who said that?
It was an old woman name.
Okay, I'm going to go through these now and get some answers. How many times has Warnock won promotion as manager? I'll start with Harry on this one.
I put 8.
Harry's gone with 8. Sam?
7.
Sam said 7. Devon?
I'll be way off here then. I said 5.
You said 5. Harry, you've been looking unsure on some of these answers.
Oh,
but you made a very good start here. It is 8 times.
It's getting ridiculous now.
It's
getting ridiculous.
Question number 2. In August 2014, he returned to Crystal Palace for his second spell as manager. Who did he replace? Devon, I'll start with you.
I've got the mighty Mariner manager, Ian Holloway.
You've gone with Ian Holloway. Sam?
I thought Ian, but I went Pulis.
You went with Tony Pulis. And Harry?
I went Pardew. Alan, the main man, Pardew.
3 different.
Pulis was the second option. So.
Pardew was later because
I think Pardew replaced Warnock when he left,
Fair enough.
Warnock replaced Tony Pulis.
Yes.
No.
Because he was manager when they drew Liverpool, wasn't
The
he?
Cristambul. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's
And
annoying.
he won the Premier League Manager of the Year 3 months before leaving.
Wow.
Question number 3. Warnock has managed 5 different Yorkshire clubs during his managerial career. How many of them can you name? So you don't have to, well, you can show your papers, but just read out the ones that you've got, starting with you, Sam.
Sheffield United, Leeds, and Gainsborough, because I knew you managed them. But
You've gone with those 3. Devon, what have you gone with?
Well, Gainsborough are North Nottinghamshire, I think. But I've gone with, so for definite, I think Sheffield United, Leeds. I've got Chesterfield, but I think that's North Derbyshire, but I feel like you've written it down as Chesterfield, as Yorkshire. And then I've got Bradford and Barnsley. So to recap, Chesterfield, Sheffield United, Leeds United, Bradford and Barnsley.
Okay, those are your 5. Harry, how many answers have you got for this one?
I've put 5 just because you said there's a maximum of 5 points available. So
Yep.
I put 5, and I just put teams in the area-ish. So Sheffield United, Rotherham, Barnsley, York City.
oh
and
no,
Leeds.
Rotherham! He did manage.
Okay. I can tell you if I think that.
Damn it!
I've got a feeling that Harry's actually scored the highest on it.
Of course he has.
Okay, so first of all, if I go through the one, Gainsborough, because I checked this, Gainsborough is in Lincolnshire.
Damn it.
Chesterfield, I don't think he managed, Devon. I don't think he did. The
That's what-
five Yorkshire clubs he managed are Scarborough, Huddersfield Town,
Yeah, he did.
Sheffield
Ooh.
United, Leeds United, and Rotherham United.
Damn it.
Oh, I forgot about. Connor's going to kill me. I forgot about Rotherham.
I should have just guessed 2 others.
Okay, so question number 4. Who did Warnock's Cardiff draw 0-0 with on the final day of the 2017-18 season to seal their promotion to the top flight, the Premier League? Harry, what have you gone with for this?
I have no idea, so I went Stoke City.
Gone with Stoke. Sam?
Leeds.
Leeds.
Also
and
no idea.
Devon?
Also Leeds.
Went with Leeds as well. I'm afraid none of you are correct. It was in fact Reading. Quite different.
I was never going to pick them.
Wolves went up as champions, as Devon mentioned. And question number 5. Let's see if you can remember him saying this name in interviews. What is Neil Warnock's wife's first name? Sam, I'll start with you.
I said Margaret.
You said Margaret.
An old woman
Devon?
name.
I feel like
Sorry for the Margarets listening. If you're,
I feel like I've heard him mention D a few times, so I just picked a random name starting with D. Dorian.
Okay.
Dorian.
And Harry?
That's
That's very obscure.
I meant to put Barbara, but I put Bardra by accident. But that is Barbara. I've got no. I'm just trying to think of what new
Please don't say it's
names-
Barbara.
likely names Neil Warnock.
If it's
If it's
wrong,
Barbara,
it's
I'm
spelled
retiring.
Bardra.
I'm retiring from this podcast.
Okay. The name is in fact Sharon.
No!
He knows. Devon knows he's heard it. He's heard
common
it
old
say
woman
Sharon.
No, honestly, I went to put Sharon down and went, wait, isn't that Harry Redknapp's wife? And then just went with something else. Damn it!
I think Sandra.
No.
Sandra, yeah.
Sandra, yeah.
That's it. Oh, damn it.
But
Harry
it
Redknapp's done me a few times on this.
is indeed Sharon. So that is the end of this week's. And Harry looked unsure at a few of those questions. He's actually won this round.
Got
with
4 points, lads.
Should we-
That's what
should we be
exactly what we
surprised?
said. We said, look at him. He knows the answer. He's going, oh.
No, it was the
Oh,
Pardew one that I didn't know. It was either Pardew or Pulis, and I put Pardew. Pardew? Alan. I put Alan is my answer.
To be fair, earlier I called him Andrew Pardrew, nearly, so.
Well done, Harry. Well done.
So yeah, that is the end of this week's quiz. Harry
Again.
now has a 5-point lead ahead of Sam and an 8-point lead over Devon. So pretty clear cut there. With that is the end of this week's podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. It's been really good to actually talk about some football actually taking place rather than news. I've really enjoyed that. But have a good weekend. There's lots of good stuff happening. There's the FA Cup quarter-finals, 4 of those, of course. Norwich are going to beat Man United in that and get European football for next year.
Go on, George.
Who knows?
Magic of the Cup.
In the Premier League,
That's
it's
still a thing.
West Midlands Derby, Villa against Wolves, and there's some big games in the Championship too. Brentford against West Brom, Leeds against Fulham, and Middlesbrough go to Stoke in Warnock's first game. But enjoy those games, enjoy the FA Cup, and have a good week. And we will see you for episode number 10. See you next time.
10 weeks of this podcast.